Hi, everyone. Welcome to the B++ podcast, a podcast where we speak with technology leaders, people who are pushing the boundaries, people who are setting new rules for the industry as a whole. And of course, I'm very happy to have with us a very special guest today, Steve de Mamiel, who's the director of Hostopia and the author of The Mongrel Method, Sales and Marketing for the New Breed of Buyer. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Very happy to have you.
Fabulous to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting journey. I believe Hostopia is one of the leading hosting providers in Australia. And so the journey from being, the director of a hosting company for you being to you being a coach to then writing a book about sales. How did this come about? What inspired you along the journey?
Yeah, well, fundamentally, it's all about helping small and medium business owners succeed, and the tools that have enabled that along the way. Mm-hmm. And so 4 years ago, Hostopia in Australia was only 6 people, and it's now 96. And wow. Some of that's been done through acquisitions. Mm-hmm. So that's been interesting in itself, bringing together different sales and marketing teams and joining those cultures together. And that's been a really important part of the success. But fundamentally, along that journey, it's been about working with our customer base, which is predominantly, as I said, small, medium businesses, and helping them to build those businesses. And the digital space, that digital transformation that a lot of them have been on with us over the last few years, has been about helping them reach their own customers and develop solutions for those customers, and really getting clear about the particular problem they solve. So that's what's really, I guess, I found very rewarding, and the part of the journey that I've really enjoyed is watching some of our smaller customers become bigger customers and really grow and develop great profitable businesses that have employed people and contributed to their own community and their families. So that's really rewarding. And a lot of our work has been helping them tell that story, communicate exactly what they're doing for their customers. And that's what's really led me into the book, was as I was helping our own customers and working with our own sales and marketing teams, I'd tell a few stories about when I was a uni student working at vineyards around Western Australia. And some of those analogies that I developed around how people would interact with my dog, Samuel de Mamiel, they would stick some of those ideas, and I'd often later have people repeat back to me some of those stories that I told, or some of those sales analogies that I used around the dog, and I realised that they were sticking. There's nothing worse than going through sales and marketing training and getting it drummed into you on day 1 and forgetting it on day 7. So the stories that I told around the dog and those analogies that I used, people recalled and they were able to implement. And so when I was about a dozen or so stories along, it became the book, The Mongrel Method.
Fantastic. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
And I was going to say, so I often get asked about the title, The Mongrel Method. And so that's a really bit of a play on this idea that sales and marketing need to be working together. So, and if you know what a mongrel dog is, it's a mix of breeds. So we're really talking about the mix of sales and marketing, hence the name, The Mongrel Method.
Yeah, I'm glad you told me about it. I was going to ask you that in any case. Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about this podcast for 2 reasons. I was just mentioning to you earlier, I love dogs. I mean, I think that's the only thing in the world that makes me weak as a person, looking at a dog. So that's one. And the second thing, we interact with a lot of technology CEOs, founders, SME owners. And I've been very passionate about the whole concept of what problem are we solving, right? So when we speak with a lot of startup founders as well, I always try to ask them, what problem are you solving? And my response to, when they tell me what problem they are solving, in a lot of cases, is that you are definitely solving a problem, but it's not a big enough problem, or it's not high enough on the list of problems. So the other reason I mentioned I was very excited about today's podcast is the fact that, there's no business without sales. There is no business, especially for, smaller businesses or startups, the fact that they don't have the luxury of talking about, organizational culture. They don't have the luxury of talking about, sort of non-linear methods of running businesses or whatever else. It's very existential. It's very, it's in a lot of cases very urgent, right? And especially in the middle of a pandemic where so many businesses are struggling, I think there's no, better thing to talk about than the sales. So, so I want to understand a bit more about, inspirationals from Samuel. So in the sense that, like, I understand that you mentioned it's a combination of marketing and sales. I've been saying it for years that now sales is more like marketing and marketing is all like sales, right? So in the sense that there's hardly a difference, right? We talk a lot about inbound marketing. We talk about, outbound doesn't work, especially, in a lot of cases. So maybe if you could share, let's say, a couple of, the commandments, from the book in terms of what do you think really works? I mean, what's the first thing that you would like to tell a lot of startup founders or small business owners in terms of what's the biggest takeaway from the book in terms of, what they can implement right away?
Yeah, well, your earlier point about the problem being big enough, I think that's really where a lot of people trip over. They have a solution and their prospect acknowledges that that is a problem, but it's not big enough to make a dramatic change here, now, today. And there's 5 other things that sit in front of that particular problem that need to be resolved before they get to your, the solution that you're offering, the problem you're trying to solve. And so, that's the real test of a good salesperson. Can they actually work out very quickly what opportunities do they kill off, do they walk away from? And, I've got a chapter in the book called Working Like a Dog. And a lot of salespeople think that, that if they just work harder, they'll get better results. But in fact, it's not about working harder. It's about working smarter and working out which problems, which opportunities you should walk away from. And unless the prospect can articulate what it means for their business if they solve this problem, and it needs to be their future vision of the future, not one that you're pushing at them. That's really important. So it's got to come from the customer. You can't push the customer along a sales process. You can only show them a path and lead them forward. And they've got to go on that journey themselves. So if you feel like you're pushing this prospect along, it's time to walk away. I've also got another chapter in the book, which I call Stop Playing Fetch. And a lot of salespeople talk to a prospect, and the prospect's semi-interested, and they say, well, look, give me a proposal. And so the salesperson runs off and madly writes a proposal and brings it back. And the prospect looks at it and says, oh, look, we've had a conversation internally. We want you to change a few things. We're going to tackle this problem differently. Why don't you go away and make those changes and come back? And it's a bit like a game of fetch. So the salesperson is like this over-enthusiastic dog playing fetch, brings the ball to the prospect, and the prospect, instead of saying, look, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do it anytime soon, just go away, they play this game of fetch and they take the proposal and throw it away, and the salesperson, like an over-enthusiastic puppy, chases after it and retrieves it and brings it back. And this game can go on and on until often the salesperson's sales manager says, this is a complete waste of time. This is not going anywhere. Forget about it. So salespeople need to watch out if they're getting caught up in this game of fetch where, in fact, the prospect is not saying, We're not doing it. We're not buying from you anytime soon. But in fact, they're politely getting the salesperson to go away by engaging in this game of fetch. And that might mean updates to a proposal. It might be questions about how could the problem could be solved, and that translates often into free consulting services.
Mm-hmm.
So if it feels like you're running after something for the prospect and bringing it back and dropping it at their feet, and then being sent off again to do some more work, and you, the salesperson's doing all the work, you're caught up in this loop of playing fetch with the prospect, and it's time to politely walk away from those opportunities.
Wow, I just at least remember 100 incidents of me playing fetched over the last few
Yeah,
years.
we've all done it.
Yeah, exactly.
We all
And
do it. We all hope. We all hang on to hope.
We do, and it's difficult to sort of walk away, and especially if the client is somebody that you really want to work with, or and yeah. So how do you prevent this? I mean, in the sense that how do we sort of prevent ourselves from playing fetch? I mean, when do you know this is not a qualified prospect or a lead, and when do we say, okay, we are not doing this anymore?
Yeah. So there's two things I look for: an investment of time or resources. So the client, the prospect, needs to invest in this opportunity. And if they're not investing time and they're not investing resources, they're not playing. They're not looking to solve this problem. So when I talk about resources, so they might spend money on doing the things that have to happen beforehand. So if you're rolling out some software, that might mean you need to upgrade some equipment. You might need to buy some servers. And they might be on a 6-week lead time. So has that investment been made?
Right.
So I always go looking for the prerequisites that have to happen before your sale happens. So is the customer doing those things? So if a business case has to be written, some business analysis need to be done. Has it been resourced with people to put that documentation together? So they're the sort of things you really need to be looking for to see if this deal is going to advance. So time and resources, they're the two tests. And if neither of those are happening, I will often confront the prospect and just say, look, these things have to happen beforehand. I'm not seeing them done. It would appear that we're not going to meet this deadline that you and I spoke about, or this timeline you and I spoke about. Maybe I should come back and talk about this down the track when you've done those things. Or the business case needs to be written. And I'd say to the prospect, look, you're clearly not resourcing the business case. The capital expenditure is not going to happen with that business case. Maybe we should meet again when you've actually resourced it. So that's just this polite. So there's lots of ways of framing that, but you're essentially politely offering to leave. You bring it to a head. You put it on the table and say, look, this doesn't feel like a deal that's going to advance because you haven't invested in it yourself. So there's no point in me continuing my own investment. It's time for me to move on to the next opportunity. So that's the process that I go through. Is there time and resources allocated? If not, it's time to politely go away and move on to the next opportunity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I must say I learned it the hard way as well, a few years back. I'm still learning, obviously. Some of the things that you're sharing, I'm thinking, how can we implement this tomorrow or today? But I remember I was speaking with, a sort of fellow co-founder, and I was speaking with them about, in our business, obviously we work across markets, across industries, in a single day, sometimes we get so many emails for people asking for proposals, and there was a time where we had a dedicated team of people who are just writing proposals, business analysts who are trying to figure this out. And I remember there came a time and we said, unless the client invests their time with us, I mean, we don't even know whether they are for real, whether they even want to do it. Are they just collecting proposals? And so, so that's something that we've tried to implement. And yeah, at least I think we are a lot more focused, and I'm sure thousands of people out there can sort of immediately relate to playing fetch, and we've all
Yeah,
been doing it for so many years. Which brings me to the next question about, you know, you mentioned, marketing and sales conversions, right? So
yeah.
do you see that it happens differently for, let's say, B2B businesses versus say B2C businesses? Or do you think, similar sort of models are being adopted for both industries? Because I mean, both have their own set of challenges, right? For instance, in B2C businesses, we always wonder, the consumer has so many choices these days. If let's say you're rolling out a new product, the consumer is spoiled for choices, then most of your time goes into marketing and getting people to sort of start sampling your product. And, just the cost of acquisition can be very high as well. And whereas in B2B businesses, it's so complex in terms of, people come to you when they're ready. Yeah, like you mentioned, you can't keep following up with people or whatever, knocking on doors and just, so in the sense, there's an element of that as well. So how do you see the convergence, the mongrel method playing out for B2B businesses versus B2C businesses?
You look, I think they're very similar, and what's driven it is the cost of acquisition.
Right.
The days of having a salesperson just chasing somebody who might look like a customer, who might want to buy what you're offering, that's a very expensive, that's a lottery.
Yeah.
A very expensive way to do it with, people doing it. So this is where marketing needs to step up. And, I talk about in the book that when be it B2C or B2B, that consumer, that customer is 70% of the way along that purchasing journey before they engage with the company directly. We've all done it. We've all bought a new bicycle, and we've done a huge amount of research on what sort of bike we want. We've spoken to peers. We've been on forums and social media sites where our tribe who likes that sort of bike has been. You were talking earlier about buying a dog. You've done all that research, no doubt. You've been through all those sites. Looked at different breeds and, the attributes of different breeds. You've done all that work before you've picked up the phone to a breeder. And we all do it, but strangely, when it comes to our own business, sometimes we want to sell differently. We expect our own customers to do things differently to us. If we're looking to implement a piece of software, we're looking to buy a SaaS solution, we're looking at what other companies have done. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We know there's lots of white papers out there. We know there's lots of content. We know there's lots of reviews out there on it. And it doesn't matter if you're looking for a review for a piece of software from Gartner, or you're looking for a restaurant review on TripAdvisor. You're doing all of that work up front, and that's the responsibility of marketing. And when they finally the customer is pretty much, they're 3/4 away along that buying journey, the role of the salesperson is just to help them complete that journey, deal with the last bits of friction, and enable that sale, rather than let the customer stumble their way through that last piece. So, the salesperson's role now is really just to tidy up the loose ends and accelerate that purchasing decision. And ultimately, people want to buy from people, but they want to be doing that independent third-party research first before they're engaging with a salesperson. And it's marketing's role really to do that. And the piece that often gets forgotten about in the marketing piece is there's people that don't complete that journey. They pick up the phone early, they're not quite ready, or they discover something that stops them from completing that purchase. The problem they're looking to solve might be more expensive than they had anticipated. Something happens. It's really then back to marketing to keep them, you keep nurturing that lead. So it's not this one-way linear process. There are people who are going to drop out at that sales engagement piece, stepping along the line. And those people need to be handed back to marketing or remain in that marketing funnel. So if they resurface, if they're back in a position to buy, that they're still thinking about your company and they will come back and re-engage with one of the salespeople. So I think, and the third part of all of that piece is down the track upgrades, additional solutions you might offer. Again, that comes back to marketing as well. So it's this circle rather than this linear process where the customer, the prospect, engages with sales and marketing at different stages of the life cycle. So they're engaging with marketing, as they're making decisions around what they want to purchase, or if they leave the buying journey, or it's down 18 months down the track and it's time for upgrades or solving the next problem. Marketing and sales need to be coming in and out of that customer journey.
I understand. That's very fascinating. So, I mean, what I understand quite, that sort of resonates with me a lot from what you just said is the fact that, I think a lot of the companies, the big mistake that they're making is when the customers or prospects are not quite ready, instead of engaging with them on the marketing side of things, they're engaging with them from a sales point of view, and that's not going to work. So, I mean, they're just not ready yet. So, like you mentioned, multiple marketing touch points, and this could be that decision making process could be a lot longer. So whichever stage they are in their decision making process, the marketing needs to continue to provide them with something useful to sort of get them from being half ready to completely ready. And then, like you said, which will break the hearts of many salespeople, that they have to tidy up. So in the sense that, but again, I do a program for some of the universities on sales, and I just always say that, the way marketing has evolved, sales has evolved as well, right? And in the sense that it's not just a question of sales is also marketing, right? So I don't think you're a sales professional unless you are a marketing professional and you're able to sort of market your services or products also. So just a couple of follow-up questions based on what you said. So first thing, you mentioned that, it's not a linear journey, it's a circular journey of, from a prospect's point of view and the way they are engaging with, your company. So how are some of the most effective ways, right, from a marketing, professional's point of view to engage with those prospects at different stages within that journey? So in the sense, I come and I, like we discussed about either getting a dog or let's say getting a software solution or whatever. So I come, I Google search, and I found 5 companies. You also mentioned something about third-party websites. So, if you could just sort of highlight 3 or 4 sort of interesting avenues along this journey. So that's number one. The second question that I had for you based on what you just said is that you mentioned that we do 70% research even before we, start interacting with the company. So is that what you mean when you say, the new breed of buyers? Or if not, then what do you mean by the new breed of buyers?
Yeah, so the new breed of buyer is certainly the one who has done that research. If we go back 10 years, and it's now probably 10 years now, where that, the salesperson held the information. And if you wanted the information, you had to go to the salespeople and talk to them about it. That research was happening face to face. That's not the case anymore. The research, all the content, the discussion around what the problem you're looking to solve is out there on the web. So that's the flip. The salesperson no longer is the custodian of the information around how your problem is solved. So we need to be really mindful of that. So if the salesperson is no longer the only source of information around the problem you're looking to solve, that salesperson needs to take on a new role, and that role really is the discovery of how this journey can be completed, or how the problem might be better defined. And I think a lot of customers come at it with some preconceived ideas around what the perfect solution might look like. So I think the role of the salesperson is still required to help that customer exactly define the perfect solution or the best solution. So that often gets forgotten. And, you know, a good salesperson will say, look, I've seen this problem tackled this way, or I've seen these issues arise. Is this relevant to you? At least table those to the prospect. They've got to make that decision themselves. They can't be pushed into it. The salesperson certainly should be leading them in the right direction and sharing a bit of their experience around what might be relevant for them.
Right. So, I mean, in a way, it's become a more sort of consultative process, the sales process, that is, and obviously marketing is the one that should be providing with the information in a way. So, and then it becomes more of a friendly consultant who's sort of helping the prospect choose between the different options that they have, right?
Yeah, so, and, you know, I think that consultative piece, you've hit it exactly on the head.
Yeah.
You know, the funny thing is, in my sales career, I learned more about selling from project managers than other salespeople. And the reason for that is project managers drill down. They ask those questions that talk to time, cost, quality that a lot of salespeople will often brush over. The project manager or business analyst is mindful that if the customer is asking for something, it's going to have some sort of impact on time, cost, quality. And salespeople really need to be able to drill down and have those conversations with the prospect and say, look, you want it done by this date, but if you want those changes, it's going to have an impact. You need to compromise somewhere, or you need to be mindful of that impact. So I think, you know, the salesperson's role is really now very much that of the consultant, and almost as the project manager, taking that prospect through that final process so the expectations are met.
I mean, yeah, and especially in our industry, I mean, we see, we've not had a salesperson for 3 years, actually, because I think, we've realized that, we have other people to do the tidying up in a way. So, and a lot of them are people who are actually working on projects. So like you said, whether it's project managers or people who are, what we call IT consultants, in the sense that who understand, who do the architecture for those solutions. Because in fact, I remember many years back, I had learned something very interesting from one of my sort of more technical colleagues as well. And he said that when you are speaking with the customer, you are telling them what they should do. You're not asking enough questions. And I thought that was, it was a good moment of self-discovery for me as well. And I did question the way I had been selling for years. And I think that did make a huge difference in terms of, how we sold as a company as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it's phenomenal how, the roles are not as traditional as they used to be. And there are, very sort of thin lines between who's going to play which roles. So, the business analysts or the IT consultants or the project managers are more, more and more playing the sales role. Whereas, marketing is basically where, most of the action is happening in terms of customer acquisition in a way. So, which brings me to what we were discussing earlier, in the sense that for a customer's journey, in terms of before that 70% information is available, or they are prepared 70% in terms of making that decision and going ahead with that sale. What are some of the things, what are some of the highlights that you feel as a marketer, for all the listeners who are marketing professionals, and especially digital marketing professionals or business owners who want to sort of get that mix right? What are some of the sort of key highlights or see some most effective ways that you see that marketing professionals should engage with these prospects along their decision-making journey?
Yeah, so I would focus on customer intent, what they're doing and the action they're taking. I see in some marketing departments an over-reliance on personas and demographics and psychographics. And I think that's very much an old school approach when you didn't have the insights that you now get from, your marketing tools, Google Analytics, those sort of things. You went back and you used your own biases and you built profiles on what the customer looked like. So we've all had built these personas of what the ideal customer looks like or what our typical customer looks like. We really ought to forget about those and look at the actions that the customer or the prospect is taking and really focus on action and intent and how the prospect might show intent. What are they reading? What are they looking for? What questions might they be asking on the chat? Have they taken those prerequisite steps that we touched on earlier? So those signals of intent are more important than personas. And, there's lots of examples where, we look somebody up and down. You might be selling Ferraris in Singapore, and you've got this idea of what that customer looks like, how they dress, what career they might have. But you might occasionally have that one person walk in who's a crazy car nut who's just had a windfall, and if you're dealing with these personas and your own biases, you're going to lose that customer. So forget about what they look like or how you expect them to behave. Look at what they're doing and those signals of intent from a marketing perspective and what content they're engaged with. Are they downloading white papers? Are they spending time, going through the content that you're putting out there? They're much stronger signals of someone taking a buying journey than any profiling you might be able to do online.
Right. That's really fascinating because, again, from personal experience, we almost wrote off, a prospect last year because, they didn't fit our profile as a company. And we said, we're not going to be working with them. They're not ready. They're not like whatever, say revenue above this much, number of people this much. And actually, it was a very exciting startup, and they ended up being one of our largest customers last year. Yeah, exactly. So I know, and I can relate to what you just said. So in terms of, like you said, the whole idea, and I think we have to learn and unlearn a lot of the things that we've learned, right? For the years, this whole idea of marketing means demographics, like you mentioned, and our target customer is the CEO of a company or CMO of a company, and a company with like 100 million or 2 billion in revenue or something. There comes a startup founder who says, you know what, I want to build this, and I want to build something which is world class, and it means the world to us. And suddenly here we are building some interesting software for, somebody who's probably going to be, what we thought our target customer is maybe in 5 to 10 years time. So how do you check for, you mentioned some of the things in terms of, are they downloading, white papers? Are they going through sort of ebooks or whatever? Is there like a way that you, let's say, as a B2B company, for those of the listeners who are running B2B businesses, how do they sort of assess somebody's intent? Let's say, like SMEs, they may not always be writing, white papers or a lot of blogs or not doing a lot of content marketing. What's the easiest and the best way for them to assess the intent of a prospect?
Yeah, so I would look at what has to happen before the customer gets value out of purchasing something from you. So if you're selling kitchen renovations, is the customer making plans to get the required building approvals in place? If they're going to buy a Ferrari from you, do they have a driver's license? Now, that's a silly, obvious one, but you need to think about your own solution that you're selling and what happens before that customer gets value from your purchase, and have they done those things? So that's a mix. If you're not big on the content online, you haven't got lots of white papers, you haven't got lots of tools the customer can use, can help with their research. It's a conversation about those things that have to happen beforehand. Ask those questions, explore those issues. That's a really important part of it.
Sure. So, I mean, from what I understand is that even if that prospect could be your customer, but the intent currently shows that they are probably not ready, or they are much further behind in the journey. I mean, like, still a long way to go in terms of, like you said, the steps that they need to take. So, for instance, in our industry, we see that a lot. So, for instance, if somebody says we are going to automate our entire business process, and we will build a mega ERP system, and we are going to make sure that it integrates with every aspect of our business. And one of the questions that we ask is, who's going to be leading this project from your side? And they have an answer. And we just wonder, is this organization willing to take undertake this exercise of maybe spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, without even having an owner for this? And our experience tells us in a lot of cases that they are just not ready. It's just plans, but they're not quite ready. So yeah, I mean, that's really fascinating. I mean, if you're a small business owner and if you don't have a lot of content going around, and if you still want to understand whether that's the right prospect or lead to pursue, and a simple way is, have they the kitchen example that you used was great in the sense, do they have all the things in place before they can even embark on this journey? So the next thing I wanted to ask you about, and because it's probably always been the case, but especially from a technology point of view, the amount of times I hear this in a week is crazy. The distinction between a product company and a services company, right? So everyone talks about, and I mean, I can talk for 72 hours about products and services, right? We do a bit of both. So I don't know which one we do better and which one we do worse. I think there's a lot of learning required on both the places. But I do believe, I was speaking to the founder of a services-based company last night. And, he was saying that although, it requires a lot of risk, obviously services-based business does not necessarily mean, but it tends to be a bit safer. You can hire more people as and when you get more business, and so there is a different way you sort of market that business as well. Product is more of a risk. It's more of a hit or a miss as well, in the sense that you spend 6 months building something, then you take it to the market, and then you may realize whether the market's ready for it, or whether your product's ready for the market, or like maybe you're ahead of your times, or, not quite, you missed the bus. There could be many things. But in terms of marketing and sales, right? Because I've heard from numerous entrepreneurs and a lot of, CEOs, they say, but ours is a services-based business. And I always hear this from them saying, oh, it's so easy to market a product-based business because, all roads lead to that one thing. But whereas when you are a multi-service company, it just tends to be a bit tricky. So is there anything that you feel, that product companies or services companies can do differently from each other when it comes to their marketing? Because, I mean, that's where most of the action is happening. Because how do services company tell one singular story, a powerful, impactful story? And on the product side, do you feel that they need to just stick to that story, or they need to add more dimensions to their story?
Yeah, I don't make a significant distinction between the two. Ultimately, it comes down to what problem is being solved. And that might be an intangible problem, that might be a feeling or some intrinsic desire from the customer that you're solving, that you're addressing. Regardless of both businesses, the trick is, does the customer look at what you're offering and can they say, yes, that is a problem I have. That's the feeling I want to solve. That's the feeling I want to experience. The company with the offer in front of me understands that they have a plan to solve that. They've clearly articulated that plan and they're showing me what success looks like. So, I always go back to the classic 3-act structure. There's a hero of the story who's trying to overcome a problem. They meet a guide or a mentor, and that's the service provider or the product provider, and they're showing them what success looks like, and that success is solving that problem, experiencing that feeling. And the mistake that both product and services marketers make is they place themselves as the hero of that story. Your role, whether you're selling a product or a service, is to make the customer the hero, help the customer along that journey. So I think that's really important, that both product and services marketers need to understand their role is to satisfy something for the customer who's the hero of that story that they're telling. And I get that sometimes it feels easier for a product provider because the product is tangible and what it delivers and how you articulate that is really done for you already. Most people can look at a product and go, that widget does this. Your communication skills need to be a bit better with services, and that's why I think it probably gets a bit harder sometimes on the services front, because there's more of an onus on the ability for the service provider to communicate more clearly.
Right. Yeah. Again, so you said there are 3 characters in the story.
Yeah.
So the one is the customer.
3-act structure. So this is nothing new. This is classical Greek 3-act structure. Just Google 3-act structure. So that process is, again, there's a hero of the story that comes across a problem. It faces a hurdle that they want to overcome. They meet a guide or a mentor that has a plan and can clearly articulate that plan and shows them what success looks like. So think about movies, Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, up against the rebel forces, meets a guide, Yoda, who has a plan and shows him how to overcome this problem and shows him what success looks like. So if a website, your marketing communication really ought to follow that 3-act structure. It's worth spending a bit of time reading that and getting an understanding of that. Any movie that you've loved will follow that. And once people read it, they recognise it in lots of movies. And your marketing should follow that exact format as well, because people relate to it. They understand it. It's intuitive for most people. That's how these things, ought to play out. Yeah.
Right. So is that a sort of a hint of the next book that you're writing, the Star Wars theme,
The little analogy I use.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just like after the canine world, the more intergalactic world of, sales and marketing. So, I mean, that's really fascinating in terms of, like how you said, and I think it crystallizes, and I think you mentioned that a couple of times, and it just sort of completely resonates with me. Whether you're a services company or you're a product company, it's not about the services themselves. It's not about the product. It's about the problem that you're solving. And so, I mean, if for the listeners, if you are providing multiple services, but I'm sure, your company is trying to solve one problem, right? It's rare that your company is trying to solve 50 problems. I mean, if it is, then it's amazing. I hope you're doing it well. But I mean, otherwise, most companies struggle to solve one problem, but they probably provide five different services to solve that problem. And so that's something that you need to articulate. Your marketing needs to articulate and sort of stay consistent, with that positioning. So
Yeah, and that role piece is really, really important. And this is what most marketers mess up, is they position themselves as the hero.
mm,
Your role as the marketer and the salesperson is simply to take the prospect on a journey. You're the guide, you're the mentor. And the second that your marketing communication says we're the champions and we're the heroes of this story, you've got it wrong. You're pushing people away.
yeah.
You're starting to sound like a pushy salesperson.
Mm,
So I always look at some of our customers' marketing content and say, look,
mm,
you just need to turn that story.
mm,
Your role is to help the customer. Your role is and make them the hero, particularly in a B2B scenario. And if you're positioning yourself as this wonderful, I can solve everything and I'm the hero, the message is not going to get through. You've got to be able to say, I'm the guide or the mentor, and I've got a clear plan, and I can show you what success looks like. That's all you have to do.
right. Well, Steve, you are the hero of this podcast. So, yeah, I wanted to, let the listeners know where they can get your book. And, I believe that you work with organizations in terms of some consultancy that you do for them. So how can they get in touch with you? So, maybe you would want to share that.
So the best thing to do is just to Google the Mongrel Method, and you'll find me. The book's available on Amazon, and by simply Googling the Mongrel Method, you'll find me.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. It was wonderful having you here, and we wait for the next book. And I'll update you when I get the dog. I'll definitely read the book, and I strongly recommend that book to anyone who's running a business. And I think it's been, very enlightening in terms of, food for thought, a lot of things for us to think about. And I'm sure, all the listeners are thinking about it and, asking all sorts of questions. Are we trying to be the heroes? Are we not the guides that we are supposed to be? Are we complicating our lives? Are we getting our salespeople to do marketing role? Our marketing people not telling the right story? So a lot of interesting things that you've shared. Truly grateful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, and we look forward to
Great
speaking
fun.
again. Thank you so much.